There's one way where cloud computing is not a lot different than any other type of computing, and that's in the need to manage and monitor your applications and services that are running in the cloud. In this video, we'll take a look at some of the issues around monitoring and managing your cloud-based services. So when you think about cloud management and monitoring, do you think that your platform provider is just taking care of it all? Or is it something you're actively involved in and you're monitoring directly? You, as the customer, should take into consideration the idea of management and monitoring of the cloud services as much as reasonable, because in the end, it's your infrastructure or your platform or your application that's contacting your users or your customers. Your users or customers are impacted if the performance is bad or if systems are down. And if you were running that application in-house, locally on the premise, you would certainly monitor it there. So the same theory would apply to monitoring it in the cloud. But you could consider these to be a foreign platform. You don't have direct control often. You don't own it. But even if you don't own the platform, you can perform management and monitoring of the cloud systems you are using, looking at things like general resource usage, consumption monitoring, performance monitoring, network bandwidth monitoring, availability monitoring, and application monitoring of the software itself. But how? Especially when you don't own the platform or have direct access to the lowest levels of the platform. Well, it depends a little bit on what level of service you're buying, whether you're buying infrastructure, platform, or simply a software service at the highest part of the stack. So the management tools that you have available will vary and change a little bit according to those things. If you are using infrastructure as a service or platform as a service, you have access to native applications from the operating system itself. And more, management tools are being designed to bridge between on-premises and cloud-hosted components. Certainly if you're in the Microsoft stack and their servers, they're very big about part of it running in-premises and part of it running in the cloud, and a unified management model to talk to both parts at once. The principles in this case remain the same, or at least very similar. You're simply monitoring it running somewhere else. But beyond that, or if you don't have access to those, then you're probably going to rely on some tools coming from the cloud services provider. It's often the only option for software as a service where the provider is taking care of everything right up to the application level itself. The availability of tools to provide you with information about how your services are executing might well be a differentiator between providers, something to evaluate when you're discussing about entering into a new arrangement with a new provider. Most providers offer one or both of two types of monitoring. One is some kind of real-time portal where you can go to a web page or perhaps install an application and it will show you in fairly real time exactly what's happening. Conversely, you can have time-delayed reports where in some batched mode, either on a scheduled basis or on demand, a system will review and combine logged information and provide you with a report that describes what went on in the past. They both have their value, and you want to understand what's available and what kind of information you can glean from each one. So what about getting started? What do we actually do? Well, start to visualize your application performance in real time, particularly on business transactions. Monitor those business transactions and see how the service level is performing. That can both be formalized and informalized monitoring. Monitor the health of your cloud infrastructure. Isolate latency and bottlenecks. Where are things slowing down? Make sure you understand existing dependencies, where one thing depends on another, so that you know what the root cause of any failure or slowdown might be. And as much as you can, have some baseline information. Even if you take that from an on-premise solution before you move it into the cloud, because you want to know what would be normal. What is your normal resource consumption? What is your normal response time? Without knowing what normal is, it's very hard to define whether or not there's a problem. So how to get going? What should you do first and foremost? Ask your cloud provider for reports, dashboards, and portals. Press for details. Let them know what you need. If they don't have a dashboard or a portal that meets your need, by all means, tell them what you do need. And sometimes you have to go and look at their competition and see if there's something better out there. Perform your own monitoring, in band and out of band. There are a number of ways you can do this. If you have a cloud provided service, try and access it. Set up a script, set up a stress test, set up something automated that checks the response of that service on a regular basis. You can also consider using managed service providers who can perform monitoring for you. There are companies that will contract and they will perform that and give you a report and say, this is how your web service was performing over the last week or month, or send you an alert if they detect a problem. So there's some thoughts about how to go about monitoring and why you should monitor your services, even if you're running them in the cloud through a cloud provider.